Dear colleagues, good evening. I will be ready to respond to your questions about this meeting here, the past 2 days. But first, I would like to tell you that this has generally been a very helpful visit for me. I've managed to speak to many of my colleagues here, not only within the framework of the Europe-Asia Forum, where I told the audience how we see the future development of relations between Russia and the rest of the world, taking into consideration the global challenges of today, such as international terrorism, global epidemic, and so on. And of course, there was my bilateral meetings with the representatives of some of our European partners and some of the Asian countries. We've had substantive negotiations, and I'm sure they will be helpful for Russia's future relations with its partners in Europe and in Asia. Now I'm ready to take your questions. RIA Novosti news agency. Mr. Putin, today you've had several meetings on the sidelines of the summit. How do you assess their results? We know that you've been discussing Ukraine. What should be expected of it? And the issues of the gas trade between Russia and Ukraine. President Poroshenko said that you've managed to reach certain agreements, but then he said that you haven't managed to agree on everything. Could you give us more details? Indeed, we have discussed the Ukrainian issue at length, or rather, the Ukrainian issues in plural. We spoke about the issues of security, a ceasefire, and an ultimate ceasefire, and the separation of forces. We actually even almost compared maps to coordinate our attitudes and positions. But of course, this should only concern warring parties, the parties of this conflict. And we know that Russia is not a party to this conflict. What I would like to draw your attention to is, number one, I agree with my colleagues that while resolving the conflict in Ukraine, we should rely primarily on the Minsk Accords, on the agreement of Minsk. And I must say that these arrangements are not being respected by both parties, by the militia in Novorossiya and by the government in Kiev. There is a whole number of reasons for that. There are objectives as well as subjective reasons, but I do hope that all parties will do their best to abide by these agreements, by these arrangements. Secondly, the line of separation must be completed, must be fully implemented. This is what will enable us to do away completely with the indiscriminate shelling that takes away lives of civilians in the conflict area. But like I said, there are objective reasons, but there are also subjective reasons in several localities left by the militia that are supposed to be left by the militias. It has turned out that those militias are actually locals, and they say they cannot leave, they cannot withdraw, leaving their families there. You have to take this into consideration. Ukraine is also aware of these issues, and we will try to collaborate and cooperate to look for acceptable solutions. There are also similar situations when there are Ukrainian military forces in certain localities that are to be vacated in accordance with the Minsk Accord, and this is not the case so far. Now, there is another issue related to a law recently signed by the Ukrainian president. I know about the reaction from Novorossiya, from the new Russia, to this law signed by President Poroshenko. Maybe it is not a perfect document, but we believe it will be helpful, and we hope that it will be used in order to resolve the remaining security issues in Ukraine. There are issues related to the line of separation and the issues of control over it. And I hope I can say we've made good progress on this track. We have agreed that we would be using drones and state-of-the-art modern military technology that will enable us to track the origins of artillery and otherwise strikes, should such strikes take place. There will be measures implemented by France, Germany, and Russia in order to resolve the issues of border monitoring. We are to meet soon in Vienna within the framework of the OSCE to discuss technical issues related with that. Well, this is more or less the set of issues in the area of security that we have discussed. As for the gas issue between Russia and Ukraine, indeed, we did discuss these issues at length, and there has been progress on this track as well. Specifically, we have agreed with our Ukrainian counterparts on the conditions for renewing gas supplies from Russia to Ukraine, at least during the winter period. We have agreed on all the parameters for these arrangements. The only question is the credit crunch of Ukraine's national gas company. Russia cannot assume additional risks. As you know, we have handed out a $3 billion loan to Ukraine late last year. Ukraine also has arrears to Russia for the gas that we have already supplied to it. Gazprom has assumed a new modality, and that is prepayment in its dealings with Ukraine. And according to its contract with Ukraine, it cannot change this system of payment anymore. It cannot alter that. We understand the situation that Ukraine is. We see that they have this credit crunch. We do realize, and we did try to meet them halfway as regards the volume of payments for the already supplied gas, that is Ukraine's arrears. And we hope that our European partners, including the European Commission, could, and I believe should, lend a hand to Ukraine in helping it overcome this financial shortage. There are instruments that could be used. That could be bridge loans or a delay in Ukraine's next payments to the IMF or new guarantees from the European Central Bank. Известия Daily. I would like to ask you to clarify about the ceasefire in Ukraine. There are a lot of volunteers who went from Russia to join those militias in Novorossiya, even though some Russian volunteers even managed to join to enlist in the National Guard in Ukraine. What will happen to these people after a ceasefire? They are effectively criminals. Will there be some amnesty for them? I believe that we will need to address such issues according to the law, should they arise. But I would like to point you to the fact that it's not only Russian nationals that participate in the military action in Ukraine. European media actually report that there are also citizens of European countries participating in the fighting on both sides. But I agree that the most pressing issue is how we stop the bloodshed right now. TASS news agency. Mr. President, I would like to understand how the sanctions are affecting the Russian economy right now. Euro is fortifying itself against the dollar, and the dollar and the euro are both growing against the ruble. The oil is getting cheaper. What is the potential endurance capacity of the Russian economy? Well, the Russian budget has been composed based on a premise that oil would cost $96 per barrel. Oil prices are lower nowadays, but I'm sure that oil prices will stabilize themselves, and even if they were to stay at a benchmark of 80 per barrel, I believe that would not be in the interest of any of the serious players of the gas of the oil market. Even if we take the oil that is being developed in the United States, its cost of production is about $80 per barrel. So if those oil prices remain at this benchmark, oil production in the United States will crumble. And I know that in many oil-producing countries, their budgets are actually based on this calculation of around $90 per barrel. So this level of oil prices is not in anyone's interest. I believe that the current sinking of oil prices it should only be explained by the consequences of the global economic crisis. Production is going down, so people require less oil, but that should be temporary. I can tell you that the Russian government will meet all of its obligations, and our economy has enough capacity for endurance. Maybe we will need to adjust our budget. Maybe we will need to slash some of our expenses, but we will definitely not reduce or cut down our social spendings. The Russian government is capable of delivering on all of its social commitments, even given the current economic situation. We will not have to sacrifice that, and we definitely will not choose to increase Russia's budget deficit. After all, I would like to ask you how you assess the depreciation of the ruble that we are seeing right now. You seem to be quite confident about it. And also, you were talking about this decline of oil prices worldwide, and also the global economic crisis. Who would you hold to blame for these global hardships? There is this theory that it is the U.S. and Saudi Arabia that are now fumbling with global oil prices deliberately. How do you feel about it? And if you don't mind, I will ask the same question in English. As far as the rate of the ruble, of course, it is related to the state of the economy, and the Russian economy is interlinked with the global markets, with the global economic situation, and that brings us to the global oil prices, oil and gas prices. Those oil prices have gone down a bit, and of course this reflects in the state of the national economy in Russia, and of course the state of the budget. But Russia is among the world's leading countries as far as its gold and currency reserves are concerned. The Russian central bank will pursue a balanced financial policy. That means that it will be using a floating exchange rate, and it will not waste its resources to support the ruble mindlessly. But we do have enough reserves, enough financial reserves to adjust the rate of the ruble whenever we need that. I don't see any room for dramatic changes there. It is obvious that the rate of the ruble will be adjusted in correlation with the international oil prices. What about the U.S. imposed sanctions? The journalist asks. Well, of course, those sanctions do affect the state of the global economy, which is already troubled, but they do not play a decisive role. It is the overall state of the global economy that plays a decisive role in this regard. And the global economy has not managed to resume sustainable and stable growth following the global economic meltdown of 2009. Some experts say that the global economy is still stagnating or even is still in crisis. The past few years have not made it much better, but at the same time, they have not made it much worse. If you remember some of the expert assessments from 3 or 4 years ago, experts actually were predicting that a revival would be slow and painstaking, and it will even look like stagnation to some, and that is exactly what we're seeing. Still, I'm rather an optimist, not a pessimist, so I believe it will stabilize over time. As far as conspiracy theories are concerned, well, a conspiracy is always possible, but this would be a conspiracy that would be harming and affecting the conspirators more than those who they've been plotting against. Like I said, in the United States, the national budget is relies on an assessment of about about $90 per barrel for oil. So trying to bring oil prices down globally would actually seriously affect oil production in the United States itself. And I don't think America's oil industry would be happy about that. So I do expect prices to stabilize and maybe they will be adjusted for in an upwards trend. We can have one final question, ladies and gentlemen, right now. What if I will tell you later. We have a proverb in Russia. It is a bit crude about a grandma and a grandpa. You know, as regards what if, you know, if a grandma had a penis, she would be a grandpa. That's how we say. And that relates to your questions about what if. In any case, so far, this is mere speculation. There were cases when oil prices went down even lower. So in that case, we will have to deal with that. We will have to use our reserves, our currency reserves. The Bank of Russia has over 400 billion stacked, and the government of Russia has 2 reserve funds, each holding about 100 billion. So we are feeling rather confident. We do know that the global economy will grow no matter what. And that means that global demand for energy resources will grow. And the sanctions that we are discussing right now, of course, they're affecting Russia in an adverse way, meaning that foreign financial markets are closing for Russia's banking institutions. But on the other hand, those sanctions are a very strong incentive for Russia to develop itself. If we can't buy high-tech products, that means we'll need to develop something similar ourselves. And Russia is capable of that. In fact, Russia is capable of anything. Of course, we would need to develop our R&D area. We would need to develop our fundamental science and production. But I can tell you we are seeing that happen. That could be a reserve, a positive side to those sanctions that have been imposed on us. And now we have one final question. Mr. President, be careful, don't choke him. Don't choke your colleague with that cord from your microphone. Now that we see some kind of peace being restored in Ukraine, can you say that Russia has failed to provide enough support to Donetsk and Lugansk? They have a lot of civilian casualties there. They have infrastructure and buildings completely destroyed there. Will Russia participate in helping out and reviving the economy of that region, or will that be solely up to Ukraine? And now, if Ukraine does not manage to find solutions to its gas issues in winter, and people in Donbass will be freezing during the winter, will Russia supply gas by way of a debt? Well, I can tell you that Russia will not be supplying any debt to Ukraine for no money unless we get paid. There has to be discipline on the part of the consumer. Gas in Ukraine costs much less than in Russia, and still they have problems with payments for gas. And then again, like I said, Russia issued a $3 billion loan to Ukraine late last year. Ukraine owes us $1.4 billion for 2 months of gas consumption. About its past arrears, there are even no disputes, but they don't want to pay anything. They have not paid us 500 million for the first quarter of this year, even though when we were selling them gas for $260 per cubic meter, which were very low prices. Ukrainians have not paid us for April, May, and June. They just completely ceased payments. According to our assessment, that is $5.5 billion for May, April, and June, based on the gas prices of $450 per cubic meters. Even here, Russia is willing to provide Ukraine a discount of $100 per cubic meter, and that would bring Ukraine's arrears to Russia down to $4.5 billion. Further on, Gazprom Bank has issued a loan to Naftogaz Ukraine, $1.8 billion, and Gazprom is actually entitled to demand this money to be repaid, to demand this loan to be repaid. Considering that one of the terms, one of the conditions for providing that loan was payment discipline by Naftogaz, and Naftogaz has not been paying back its loan to Gazprom. Further on, Gazprom has provided gas supplies to Ukraine for an additional $4 billion, and that amount of gas has been effectively frozen by Ukraine. They're just keeping it stored. They're not directing it to Ukraine's industries. But that's Ukraine's own problems. Russia's problem is, all the money that Ukraine owes us. It adds up to about $10 billion by now. We cannot provide any more gas to Ukraine on loan terms. And I believe that Ukrainian partners should lend a hand to Ukraine and help it with its issue of payments. Russia already is helping. Russia has assumed financial risks for that. Now it is up to you, the Europeans, to risk something to help Ukraine in its economic revival. It would not actually require large money. Several times less than what Russia has already provided. Maybe some bridge loan or something like that. Well, of course, how can we turn down Japanese media? Japanese network. Russia is pursuing close relations with China, with Japan, with Korea. How do you assess Russia's relationship with Japan? Do you see Japan as a member of this international coalition of sanctions against Russia? Thank you. Indeed, we have been promoting our relations with the Asia-Pacific countries. This is not a political decision. It is motivated primarily by the fact that this has been Russia's long-term trend in recent years, provided the rates of growth of Asian countries such as China or Japan. Indeed, it would be absolutely ridiculous not to make use of Japan's technical progress or China's economic growth or our good relations with South Korea, with the Republic of Korea. And we actually could play the role of an intermediary in trying to bring closer the two Koreas. And we are indeed interested in that because we are a neighboring country and we're interested in seeing healthy relations there. As far as our relations with Japan are concerned, in recent years, they have been developing steadily, both in terms of economic cooperation and also in terms of a political dialogue, including the solution, the future solution of the issue of a peace treaty that has yet to be signed between Moscow and Tokyo. But unfortunately, the Japanese government has decided to suspend all political contacts with Russia. This has not been our decision. We are ready to promote our relations with Japan, but now the ball is in Japan's hands and it's up to Tokyo. Thank you.